Military targets inside Iran as the conflict between the two nations enters its sixth day. The world is waiting to see whether America will join the fight. President Trump adding to the suspense.
I have ideas as to what to do, but I haven't made a final. I like to make the final decision 1 second before it's due, because things change.
Iran's supreme leader warning the battle begins as his nation's military keeps up retaliatory missile strikes on Tel Aviv. We'll have the latest developments from our correspondent there live. Stateside, more military moves, but the target is illegal immigration, not a foreign foe. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth sending 700 troops to assist immigration officials carrying out deportations in Texas, Louisiana, and Florida as President Trump takes control of another 2,000 members of the California National Guard to secure Los Angeles. New constitutional challenges ahead. Here on Capitol Hill, a partisan showdown as Senate Republicans begin an investigation into an alleged cover-up of former President Joe Biden's infirmity while in office. Democratic members walking out in protest. In money matters, the Federal Reserve saying it won't juice the economy with an interest rate cut as the threat of stagflation looms. Guess who's not happy about that?
So we have a stupid person, frankly, at the Fed. He probably won't cut today. Maybe I should go to the Fed. Am I allowed to appoint myself, Doug? I don't know. Am I allowed to appoint myself at the Fed? I do a much better job than these people.
Welcome to the Hill on NewsNation. I'm Chris Stirewalt filling in for Blake Berman. We begin tonight with the latest from the Middle East, where an increasingly desperate Iran looks to land a blow against Israel. White House correspondent Kelly Meyer will join us shortly with the reaction from the White House. But we start in Tel Aviv with NewsNation's Robert Sherman. Robert, what's the word from Tel Aviv?
Hey there, Chris. And it feels as though we've hit that point where the next 24, 48 hours are set to be highly consequential. The Israeli government meeting tonight, plotting out their next move. They have said publicly that Thursday, which would be tomorrow for you all back in the States, we could see an escalation. It's unclear if that is genuine from the Israelis or if it's meant to mislead the Iranians. But one thing that the Prime Minister has said, reiterating tonight, is that whatever they do, they will do arm in arm, on the same page, with the United States. Here's the Prime Minister.
I
want to thank President Trump, a great friend of the State of Israel. I thank him for standing by us, and I thank him for the support the United States is providing in defending Israel's skies. We are in continuous contact.
So that begs the question, could the United States be directly involved and enter the war, potentially striking Iran directly? The Supreme Leader warning the Americans against that, saying, quote, the Americans must understand that the Iranian nation will not surrender and that any military intervention will lead to irreversible damage. What we have seen here tonight in Tel Aviv, Chris, a pair of barrages coming our way, with the initial estimates putting them as being a bit smaller in size, maybe a half dozen missiles or so. But whether folks are above ground in the cafes or below ground in the shelters, there is one question that is top of mind from everyone. What comes next? Only time will tell. Chris?
Robert Sherman, stay safe. Thank you so much. Here in Washington, President Trump was peppered with questions on his plans about whether the U.S. would take offensive action. NewsNation correspondent Kelly Meyer is live at the White House. Kelly, what do you know?
Yeah, hey there, Chris. So President Trump, for a second day in a row in the Situation Room, he just wrapped up a meeting with his national security team. White House officials tell us that lasted roughly around an hour. He keeps saying that he hasn't made up his mind whether or not the U.S. will join Israel's strikes against Iran. But he continues to caveat this with he has been consistent in that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon. He says they are a few weeks away, or were a few weeks away, from creating a nuclear weapon. And he said today that they were very close to a deal.
They should have made the deal. I had a great deal for them. They should have made that deal. 60 days we talked about it, and in the end they decided not to do it, and now they wish they did it. And they want to meet, but it's a little late to meet, but they want to meet, and they want to come to the White House. They'll even come to the White House.
That last claim striking a nerve with the Iranians, Iran's mission to the Union hitting back, saying that, quote, no Iranian official has ever asked to grovel at the gates of the White House. The only thing more despicable than his lies is his cowardly threat to take out Iran's supreme leader. So President Trump continued to say in the Oval Office today that Iran wants to come, but can't with, quote, bombs dropping all over the place, he says. Chris.
Okay, Kelly, thank you so much. Joining us now, Republican Congressman Bill Huizenga of Michigan, who serves on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Congressman, thanks for making time for us. You have been a staunch supporter of what the Israelis are doing to Iran, but have said, quote, that you would much rather see the Israelis take care of this on their own rather than the U.S. joining in offensive action. But Israeli leaders say they can't do it without direct U.S. involvement. They cannot eliminate Iran's nuclear program unless the U.S. gets engaged directly. Are you willing to go along with that?
I think there's certainly things that we can do prior to that, and we need to be doing those things. We also, frankly, need to engage our Arab partners and friends in the region who are also not interested in having an Iranian nuclear program. So I'm not sure we're quite at that point yet, but the president's been clear. All options are still on the table, and it's a real possibility that that may happen. In my mind, there's a pretty big distinction between troops on the ground and utilizing the airspace and taking out a threat. Now, and we also, I should say, have to make sure that we are separating out the Iranian people versus the Iranian leadership. And I do think that there's a lot of well-intentioned Iranian people in this who are not happy with their own government. We know that, and we see that.
Okay, this debate has exposed a long-standing rift in your own party about the use of force abroad. Folks like your House colleague Marjorie Taylor Greene and MAGA influencers like Steve Bannon and Tucker Carlson are pressuring the president to stay out of the fight. President Trump does not seem to appreciate that suggestion. Listen to this.
My supporters are for me. My supporters are America first. They make America great again. My supporters don't want to see Iran have a nuclear weapon.
Now, there are multiple resolutions being considered in Congress to bring the legislative branch into this decision on Iran. Do you think a majority of your conference would support offensive action against Iran? Where do you count the noses on Republicans in this question?
Yeah, quite honestly, in my estimation, yes, I do think a majority would be in favor of something. Again, you got to look at it, what the details of that would be, and limited. And I know in your run-up, you were saying nobody does nothing better than Congress, and these AUMFs, are these authorized use of military force declarations have a shelf life like the plutonium that we're dealing with. And I agree. We do have to have an active engagement with this and be involved. And but we also have we have given the president certain abilities and powers voluntarily, and some would maybe argue too many of those when it comes to using our troops that way. But, you know, I think there is truly consensus on the fact that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon unless you're truly the most libertarian of libertarians, where you say, hey, anybody can do whatever they want on the world stage. If they want a nuclear weapon, fine. But then that means you're going to have a nuclear Saudi Arabia, nuclear UAE, where's Egypt? We already have India and Pakistan in that region that are both nuclear powers. And we've got to stop this at some point, because here's the thing. They are not rational players. The leadership is not rational players when it comes to the world stage. And them being allowed to have a nuclear weapon, I think would really supercharge, as Bibi Netanyahu said, the Hamas movement.
Okay, Congressman, I have to turn you loose, but I want to get your take on this Wall Street Journal report on the Israelis running low on the munitions for its missile shield, and that the U.S. is augmenting our allies' defenses, and that's putting a strain in turn on American inventories and potentially our own ability to defend ourselves. This highlights the complaints of many in Congress who say that the much ballyhooed increases in defense spending for the coming year, a lot of smoke and mirrors. What do you say? Is there enough money being set aside for defense spending in the coming year?
Well, I want to make sure that we're using it more efficiently. So I'm not privy to the exact appropriations dollars and what that is looking like. But we know that we have to be able to defend ourselves first and foremost. then defend our most vital allies and helping them do that. So we've got to be careful as to what we are putting forward. We can't empty our own chambers here just to defend others. We do have to make sure that we're able to defend ourselves. But as long as we have that capacity, I'm good with making sure that our allies have the weapons that they need to defend themselves as well.
Okay, if you knew it was great to be from Battle Creek, you would know him already. But if you don't, there he is, Congressman Bill Huizenga. We thank you. Joining us now, Mick Mulvaney. You know him. You like him, I hope. You should. He's the former chief of staff in the first Trump administration, and he's a NewsNation contributor. Mick, I want to ask you about Tulsi Gabbard, your former colleague, Tulsi Gabbard. Her appointment as Director of National Intelligence was seen as a big shift in U.S. foreign policy, but we learned this week that she wasn't even included in a key strategy session at Camp David, and the president publicly rebuking her for her, let's say, gentle assessments of Iran's intentions. Listen to this.
The IC continues to assess that Iran is not building a nuclear weapon, and Supreme Leader Khamenei has not authorized the nuclear weapons program that he suspended in 2003.
I don't care what she said. I think they were very close to having.
Was Tulsi Gabbard window dressing for, was this a sop to the anti-interventionists, and now the Hawks are in charge?
A couple different things. Keep in mind, you go to that video real briefly. Who was sitting next to her during that testimony? It was John Radcliffe, the head of the CIA, and he didn't object. He didn't say, no, by the way, yes, they are. That was in March, in late March, and all the intel that we've sort of had, again, you always sort of struggle through the fog of war on the data that you're getting, indicate that maybe the Iranians had really ratcheted things up heavily in the last couple of weeks. As to her not being invited to Camp David, neither was Radcliffe, by the way. She apparently had National Guard duty. He wasn't invited originally. He did end up going at the last minute. And then you fast forward to this week when they were going to have a meeting in the Situation Room without her, and they changed the schedule so that she could participate. I think, Chris, this is maybe one of those many, sorry, you and I are familiar with many of these, sort of this, inside the beltway sort of.
What the president said there did not, I don't care what she said. I don't care what she says.
He doesn't care what anybody says. I mean, that's I got asked the other day about Steve Bannon. He doesn't care what Steve Bannon says. He doesn't care what Lindsey Graham says. This is one of those rare things, Chris, where he has a fundamental principle. No nuclear weapons for Iran. Donald Trump, as you know, can say a bunch of different things about a bunch of different things. But if you listen very closely, go back 10 years, no nuclear weapons for Iran. This is a fundamental principle for him, just like defending the borders is. And I think if anybody says, look, we've got data that says otherwise, he doesn't care at this point.
Will you and your Clemson necktie stay around for the remainder of the show?
How did you know it was Clemson? Most people think it's Virginia.
I know you better. I know who you represent. You can take the politician out of the man, but you can't. You know what I'm going to say.
I'll be here as long as they have me.
All right, Mick, we thank you. We'll see you later in the show. Coming up, U.S. air and sea power on the move, how the Pentagon is preparing in case Iran ramps up its attacks. Plus, Hegseth in the hot seat again, how a Senate hearing on the Defense Department budget quickly turned contentious. The Federal Reserve with a forecast for overcast skies, slow growth, and stubborn inflation. We'll explain what it all means. Welcome to Washington. You're watching The Hill on NewsNation, and we'll be right back.
Suspected from the beginning that America was also involved in this malicious move of the Zionist regime. But with these recent statements that they are making, this suspicion is being strengthened day by day. The damage America will suffer if it makes a military intervention in this field will undoubtedly be irreparable.
That was Iran's Supreme Leader Ayatollah Ali Khamenei trying a little saber rattling after a disastrous week for his military. But the threats are credible enough that the U.S. is arranging to evacuate American citizens from Tel Aviv. And in Britain, Prime Minister Keir Starmer put his cabinet on alert for a potential U.S. attack on Iran. So let's break down what's at stake. Joining us now to do that, retired Air Force Brigadier General John Teichert. General, okay, so this map shows us where U.S. troops are located in the Middle East. You see those locator situations, handy dandy. How much of that is really realistically within the reach of Iran's missiles?
Chris, right now we know that arsenal of ballistic missiles has been dwindling quickly.
Yeah.
And all of these locations theoretically are, and I think it's important to realize that it's not just troop formations that could be at risk, but also diplomatic facilities in North Africa, Eastern Europe, Central Asia. All of those areas could be vulnerable as long as Iran still has a ballistic missile.
And of these installations, what would be their prize? Obviously, the Saudi, Qatar, UAE, this stuff, because those are their enemies in addition to the United States, right?
They are, and Iran could start striking American targets in those areas or important consequential targets of those nations as well. And we have to be cognizant that if they get desperate enough, they could use their remaining ballistic missile fleet to do a lot of damage in the region.
So for more than a decade, the world's been talking about the threat of Iran's military. And I get it, and it looks formidable. But after less than a week of direct conflict with Israel, the Islamic nation seems like it might have been a paper tiger. Even so, it's a big military. Look at this. That's big. The Islamic Republic has more than 580,000 active duty military personnel and the largest, or had the largest, ballistic missile arsenal in the Middle East. It also had 300 to 350 combat aircraft. What do you think is left of this? What do you think they still have left of this?
Chris, I think the things that are a concern to the United States and Israel are Israel's continued ability to have air superiority, which means strike targets at will within Iran. It seems like they've got it and likely will maintain it. And it's that residual ballistic missile fleet that could do damage. The rest of these, Iran isn't going to launch troops across a border, but they are going to continue to use those ballistic missiles as long as they have them.
And we talked a lot about during the first chapter of the war in Ukraine about how drones were revolutionizing the battlefield and the Iranians were good at drones. But drones will not give you air superiority. They can attack someplace else within a short distance, but they're not going to stop bombers and fighter bombers from blowing up your stuff, right?
That is correct. And those offensive drones that Iran launches, 1,000 miles until they strike Israel, they're very slow. They take 3 to 6 hours, easily defeated by the Israelis.
Okay, the world is very much focused on one particular piece of military hardware these days, the so-called bunker buster bomb. It weighs more than 30,000 pounds. Only the B-2 stealth bomber can carry it, and it was designed to do this work. It was designed to destroy weapons of mass destruction in protected facilities and can penetrate about 200 feet below the surface before detonating. Is this the only way? Is this the only way that you can take out Iran's nuclear program?
Chris, this is the only way from the air, and these weapons are extremely capable, especially if you use the tactic where you drop one and follow it with another, and it can strike as deep as Fordo or anything else. But there's also consideration that maybe it's a cyber attack or a supply chain infiltration or a special operations attack that could take out these facilities, not from the air, but in other ways as well.
Holy smokes, look at that thing. Gee, petite. Okay, so there could be other alternatives to this, but this is the keyless entry. This is the smoothest way in.
That's exactly right. We've tested this in the United States back in 2013, actually under my command, against targets similar to Fordo, and they can reach as deep as they need to go.
Wow. Okay, General, we thank you for your service. We thank you for your time. There is still much more ahead, including a heated hearing on Capitol Hill.
You literally covered up for a commander-in-chief that was absent.
You're pulling the military away from facing foreign enemies who literally say things like death to America.
Lawmakers spar as the defense secretary takes the hot seat. We're live from Capitol Hill on how a budget hearing went off the rails. And when you're on the go, get news from Washington as it happens. Why don't you download the Hill app for the latest in politics? We'll be right back. Welcome back to The Hill. I'm Chris Starwald filling in for Blake Berman. A live look now at Tel Aviv as Israel and Iran continue to trade missile strikes. Israeli officials say that Iran has fired more than 400 ballistic missiles into the country over the past few days. That would be a fifth of Iran's arsenal. Only a few have made it past Israel's Iron Dome and hit urban areas. Meanwhile, the U.S. is arranging evacuations for American citizens in Tel Aviv. Just ahead of a crucial meeting in the Situation Room this evening, President Trump told reporters he hasn't made a decision on whether the U.S. will join Israel's effort.
I have ideas as to what to do, but I haven't made a final. I like to make the final decision 1 second before it's due, because things change. I mean, especially with war.
This, as the Wall Street Journal reports today, that Israel is running low on interceptors to counter the long-range missiles fired from Iran and raising concerns about the U.S. burning through interceptors as well. In response to President Trump calling for Iran's unconditional surrender, their supreme leader posted on X, quote, "It isn't wise to tell the Iranian nation to surrender. What should the Iranian nation surrender to? We will never surrender in response to the attacks of anyone." Earlier today, Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth testified at a Senate Armed Services Committee hearing on the Pentagon's budget. He fielded questions on a variety of topics, including the situation in the Middle East, of course, but things went downhill from there.
You literally covered up for a commander-in-chief that was absent-minded and absent leadership. You all should be ashamed of yourself. Literally, you should be ashamed of yourself.
You are blowing through money like my fellow cadets and I did in our first Liberty after basic camp. Luckily, I didn't end up with a questionable tattoo.
Here now with more on that hearing, NewsNation Washington correspondent Joe Khalil. Joe?
Yeah, look, there was a lot there. Chris, obviously Iran top of mind, but Secretary Hegseth was there today to discuss the proposed budget for the Pentagon, and the chairman, Republican Roger Wicker, gave him a whole lot of heat because they didn't even have a budget yet. There are still holes in it. It's not complete. Secretary also got some heat from Democrats for deploying Marines in Los Angeles. At one point, Democrat Alyssa Slotkin said he didn't have the, quote, guts or balls of his predecessor who stood up to President Trump when it came to deploying military at protests. But again, obviously, Iran was a big topic as well. A lot of the questions he got on Iran, he said he couldn't talk about in the public portion of the hearing, but was able to talk about it privately in the classified setting afterwards. This is one of the moments where he actually did respond in the public setting to an Iran question. Take a listen.
We know right now that Tehran understands exactly what the president is saying. He set 60 days. They had an opportunity to make a deal. They should have made a deal. President Trump's word means something. The world understands that. And at the Defense Department, our job is to stand ready and prepared with options, and that's precisely what we're doing.
Chris, I will mention that after the classified setting, at least one Democratic senator came out and told us he thinks it's more than a 50-50 chance President Trump opts for a strike in Iran after having heard what Secretary Hegseth told them.
Joe Khalil, we thank you for your help tonight. Okay, a lot of the debate in Washington is centered on what the U.S. might do to Iran. But that hints at a deeper question. What is America's relationship with Israel? President Trump says it's hunky-dory.
Mr. President, can you share some of what you've told Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu?
He said, keep going. What do I say? I speak to him every day. He's a good man, doing a lot. Been very unfairly treated by his country.
Here now, former special advisor for the Iran Action Group at the U.S. Department of State, Gabriel Noronha?
You got it.
Good. I got it. Okay, I'm going to stick with Gabriel. So one of the debates going on right now inside the right wing in American politics is Israel spying on the United States? Is our relationship, are they taking advantage of us? And that growing sentiment. Does Israel spy on the United States?
Of course they do.
Okay.
We also spy on them. That's not that much of a secret. There's only 5 countries that don't spy on each other, the Five Eyes. Everyone else, all is fair in love and war. And sometimes we gossip on our friends. We keep track of our close friends. We want to know what they're doing with their lives. What they do affects us. And so, yes, they do. We do to them. That's just the world. That's how it works.
And it sounds there like whatever tensions were between Trump and Netanyahu before, that they're in a good place now. I want to ask you about the role of U.S. Central Command Chief General Eric Kurilla, and I like, of course, that his nickname is Gorilla.
Very original.
A very original, Kurilla Gorilla. And this is his influence at the Pentagon and his influence with Pete Hegseth is said again by these same folks who are critical of Israel and critical of all of this stuff, that that Kurilla's that he's got his head right now and moving forces in and getting the things that he wants, more belligerent toward Iran. when we look at where U.S. strategy and policy is going, is that a personnel move that tells you anything?
So he is sober-minded. He's thoughtful. He's not rash. I think I can say this. He was not exactly cheerleading anything. He was giving, from what I understand, he was giving the president his best military advice, but saying, here's what could happen. Here's the good. Here's the bad. Here's how we'll execute options. And so everything I've heard is that he's been having great leadership. He's not trying, he understands he doesn't make decisions, the president does, but he's giving those best military options. So I'm pretty comfortable there with him there.
I've been surprised. Have you been surprised by how utterly degraded Iran's air defenses are, and that Israel has essentially neutralized their ability? Maybe this. How thorough is Israeli or allied control of Iran's airspace?
In 3 years, Russia has never obtained aerial superiority over Ukraine. In 3 days, Israel managed to achieve total air superiority over Iran. Iran has not shot down any of the Israeli jets, despite their claims, as far as we know. Israel has been able to have its jets over Tehran, over Iranian airspace continually now for the last 3 days in a row. Israel has suffered 12 fatalities, maybe 14. If you told me that figure a year ago, I would say you're lying. That's not possible. That's not how this is going to go. And that's because Iran and its axis of resistance really miscalculated with October 7th by doing it in staged attacks, by having Hamas go one at a time, get eliminated. Hezbollah go one at a time, get eliminated. Now Iran's on the dinner plate. And
I saw it said that not since Pearl Harbor has there been a worse military strategic miscalculation than the October 7th attacks and what it did to their coalition. One of the central debates in U.S. foreign policy for the past 15 years, is Iran sincere in wanting a deal? Is Iran acting rationally in its own defense? Does Iran want a deal or not?
They want a deal on their terms, but certainly not on the United States terms. They've always been willing to do something that advances its core interests, which is the ability to retain its terror apparatus and the optionality to go for that nuclear breakout should they want to in the future. And at this point, they have almost nothing left to negotiate. They have no cards. Israel has no reason to stop taking out, the facilities. They've already broken the seal, so to speak. And so I don't see much of any negotiation other than, frankly, what Japan had to do in September 1945, capitulation in terms over that.
Okay. Gabriel, we thank you for your time. That was helpful. Coming up, war in the Middle East, looming budget deadline. So what's the Senate up to? Of course, fighting over Joe Biden.
What we're doing right now won't help. It will not help.
President Biden was mentally unfit to carry out the responsibilities of the most powerful office in the world.
Yes, the former president's back in the spotlight, but is that the best use of time on Capitol Hill right now? I don't know. The full panel joins us next, and they'll tell us.
Bill O'Reilly on Cuomo.
What are you talking about? Here's what I'm talking about, Cuomo.
America's favorite sparring duo with TV's liveliest, most honest debate.
I just tell you the truth backed up by facts.
Tonight at 8, 7 Central, only on NewsNation.
To the Hill, I'm Chris Starwalt. Earlier today in our nation's capital, the Senate Judiciary Committee hearing on the Republican Party's probe into former President Biden's mental acuity during his term, and shockingly, things got a little tense.
President Biden was mentally unfit to carry out the responsibilities of the most powerful office in the world. Given his mental incapacity, the American people deserve to know who was running the country the last 4 years.
I believe there is a constitutional crisis. It's the collapse of Congress. What we're doing right now won't help.
Now, President Trump would find time to comment on this during all things, a ceremony in which 2 100-foot flagpoles were installed at the White House.
What he's done to this country, it's not him. He had no idea what was going on. Everybody knows that. It's other people telling this guy, here, do this, do that, and not even telling him. They just go over to the auto pen and sign whatever the hell they wanted to sign.
Senators Dick Durbin and Peter Welch would be the only Democrats in attendance at the hearing. all the others refusing to participate. And it should be noted that Senator Durbin would wind up walking out after calling the event a distraction from real issues, and Welch followed suit. Okay, the full panel is with us now. Mick Mulvaney's back. He's still a former chief of staff in the first Trump administration and NewsNation contributor. Julia Manchester, J-Manch, national political reporter for The Hill. Hannah Branch, she's the Washington correspondent for Nexstar. And our friend, counselor A. Scott Bolden, NewsNation political contributor. Julia, we begin with you. Did we learn anything about Joe Biden's infirmity in today's hearing?
You know, I don't think we learned anything in particularly new. I think this was definitely, a continuation of conservative Republican efforts really to dig in, on the attacks against former President Biden's mental acuity. The timing is certainly interesting. It comes amid a lot of these tell-all books, President Biden coming out saying he has cancer. He's also coming into the spotlight more in his post-presidency. He's going to be giving a Juneteenth address tomorrow.
He is?
So he is.
What you gonna say about Juneteenth? Anti-DEI. Anti-DEI.
You'll have to tune in. But I think these hearings are, for us political junkies, they are interesting because it's a chance for a lot of these lawmakers to have moments. And someone I was paying attention to was Senator John Cornyn, senator from Texas. He's facing a very, very incredibly tough primary. So this is a chance for someone like him to communicate with the conservative grassroots.
Mick, how much of, so there's the part that's, it's good to talk about the other party's problem when your own party has problems. There's the part of it that it's the dunking part is fun and politically useful, and I get that part. But there is some legal consideration here as they talk about the auto pen. The president is dialed in on this auto pen question, and that somehow they might be able to undo the Biden presidency because they'll say that he was incompetent and the auto pen was being abused. How much of that is really part of what the Republicans are doing, and how much of it is just window dressing?
My guess is there's a lot of window dressing. Here's a lot of politics. I think Julia is correct, and it's a shame because this is a serious issue. We are going to deal with this issue again and again as we go further. Listen, dementia is a bigger part of our culture than it was 40 years ago, and we should be having a conversation about what to do when the leader of the country shows signs of diminished capability. I can guarantee you, and I'm looking at my friend A. Scott Bolden, that the Democrats are going to want to have hearings about Donald Trump's mental acuity before the end of his second term. They just are. It's going to be an issue as the society ages, and it's a shame it's got wrapped up, as so many things are in politics.
Counselor.
Well, we wanted to have hearings after his first term. His own administration, which you were a part of, we're looking at the 25th Amendment. At least we heard that based on his decision making. I think it's relevant, probative, but not dispositive, if you will, of these hearings right here. I thought they were going to bring out some experts and some medical people and people from the administration. They brought out Sean Spicer, our good friend, who's on this show sometimes. And what did they accomplish? But armchairing the mental health or the lack thereof of Joe Biden. It was a complete waste of time.
You're not in charge of the Democratic Party. It would be a very different and probably more successful Democratic Party if you were. But do Democrats owe Robert Hur an apology? One thing that I keep thinking about here is when Robert Hur came out with his report and talked about Biden's
it was completely gratuitous. I don't think they owe him an apology because, listen, if I'm 80 years old, I'm not the same person I am at 60 or 40.
Right.
That doesn't mean I'm mentally incapable of doing a job. It does not.
They went hard at her, though, right?
Of course they went hard because he was gratuitous. He said he wasn't going to prosecute him because he couldn't prove the case beyond a reasonable doubt, and that the jury would review Biden as this humble guy or old man. But the fact of the matter is he didn't have to take the stand whatsoever.
Okay.
It was gratuitous. Not fair.
That's a no. That's a no from Scott. I think you're picking up it's a no from Scott. Okay, Hannah, I need to talk to you about immigration and the president's moves. So nationalizing more of the California National Guard. Pete Hegseth sending more troops to more places. In New York City, you've got one of the mayoral candidates getting himself arrested by ICE. Take the temperature right now for the administration. They continue to ratchet up but then out of the other corner of their mouth, they say, well, we're actually pulling back in these places. What do you see?
Well, I think we hear the White House consistently bringing up this issue because they think it's a winning issue for them. We've heard President Trump say how many times? Immigration is number one. That's why I got voted into this office, and that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to follow through on my plans. But we saw just last week, I think it was, that poll that showed that the way he was approaching immigration was getting less popular with Americans. And so we're continuing to watch whether or not it goes in that direction, whether voters actually like what he's doing.
Julia, this it seems like an administration at war with itself a little on this issue. We have Brooke Rollins, Agriculture Secretary, and others who are saying we can't have millions of deportations or self-deportations and have the agriculture industry, manufacturing industry, construction, restaurants, hotels. America is very reliant on the undocumented. And then on the other hand, we have Stephen Miller and others saying we want to put up big numbers. How does this get resolved?
Well, and as they're putting up those big numbers, they're making a show out of this in many ways, sending Kristi Noem, for example, out on some of these raids, putting out the names of some of these undocumented migrants they're detaining, et cetera, making a very public show out of it. But it's going to be difficult, I think, to resolve itself. I think there's a way for them to walk a fine line, but immigration is an issue that President Trump won on. But I find it interesting to look at the Democratic side of this. You're seeing them lean in a lot more. Maxwell Frost, congressman from Orlando, Florida, earlier today, essentially said that we should give amnesty or make all undocumented migrants documented here in the U.S. today. So you're seeing them lean into
wait, hold on. A big development at the Supreme Court today. Justices upholding a Tennessee law that prohibits some medical treatments for transgender youths. The 6-3 vote saw the court's left-leaning justices dissenting. The 2023 Tennessee law that the decision upheld prohibits medical providers from prescribing puberty-blocking medication, offering hormone therapy, or performing surgery. Scott, what do you think about? I take it you side with the minority in this.
I did, but this is a tough issue for Democrats and Republicans. As a father of 3 grown daughters, I can't fathom trying to make that decision before they're 18 or before their age of majority, if you will. They certainly have a First Amendment right. They certainly have these 14th Amendment rights, which the court cited significantly and regularly. At the same time, it's a deeply personal family issue. And I think the Democrats have to pump their brakes on this issue. You know, the Democrats have that far left side of their party. The Republicans have that far right, where 75 to 80% of most Americans are in the middle.
We are an 80-20 country on a surprising lot of stuff. Okay, panel. Stick around. Coming up, patriotic or grandiose? We'll tell you about Trump's new renovation at the White House. And Elizabeth Vargas reports is at the top of the hour. Could Iran use a so-called dirty bomb on Israel or against American interests? That's at 7 Eastern here on NewsNation. Stay with us. The Hill will be right back.
This is about the largest you'll ever see, and it's tapered. It's at a quality that you guys rarely get to even put up.
A live look now at the White House, where you might notice the new additions. President Trump touting the 2 state-of-the-art, 100-foot flagpoles, a gift from himself to the White House. But it might surprise you that those are not, in fact, quote, the largest flagpoles you'll ever see. That honor actually belongs to the Acuity flagpole in Sheboygan, Sheboygan, Wisconsin, standing at 400 feet tall and marked as the world's tallest symbol of freedom. But back to President Trump and his flags. Panel, they're big. It's a big flag. It has some car lot energy, has some car lot energy, but Trump goes big. Mick, what do you see?
I'm going to give you a serious answer to the question. I see a problem for where they're supposed to land the helicopter.
Very practical.
Because this is right on the South Lawn, and I'm not really sure. I imagine they considered this. They'd be landing someplace else, but I'm looking at this going, as the chief of staff who's in charge of military operations at the White House, where are we landing the helicopter without creating an increased risk for the President of the United States? And I don't know the answer to that yet.
Hannah, what do you see?
You know, I don't really have an opinion on the flags, but what I am glad about is
Don't take controversial. There's a reporter's tip. Don't take controversial opinions about the American flag.
It's not my place to decide, but I'm glad that President Trump came out this morning to view it so that he could talk to reporters about Iran. He could talk to President Biden, all the other things going on in the country, and appreciate FaceTime with the president always.
It's not shy about talking
the
to the president.
people that were putting up the flag, he actually asked them, were they illegal immigrants?
He did?
He did. And then he said to them, well, I hope you all voted for me. In 2 sentences. I don't make this stuff up.
That's amazing.
Donald Trump is I think he just sits up and thinks about stuff and just wants to do it.
So are you going to come out against the flag now?
No,
are you a Democrat now going to be anti-flag?
Better. But sometimes the grandiosity of it all, they could be put farther left or farther right. I thought about the postcards of the White House. There are millions over the years that have been published with that one flag at the top of it, and now he just destroyed all of that. You're either going to have the post-Trump or pre-Trump flags.
Does it survive?
Julia, that's a question for Julia Manchester.
You know, I mean, I don't know if it's going to survive or not, but what I see, it's interesting. Flag Day was over the weekend. We, of course, had that military parade. It's been interesting to look at some Democratic lawmakers who have been trying to, as they say, retake the flag, you know, reposition the Democratic Party, as they say, more patriotic. But this is President Trump, obviously, trying to put his own grandiosity.
But he wants to own. He has a legacy project for the White House, Truman balconies, and and he wants his own thing. So you think this hangs around, Mick?
No, I think the Democrats take this down.
Rip it right out
immediately. The ballroom that he wants to build over the tennis courts, I think, stays. But I think the flagpoles probably come down, and there'll be some sort of reason or justification. It's a hazard. It's something like that.
When that thing is snapping in the breeze, it may lift off the whole front yard. It's really something else.
It's the biggest and the best.
It's the biggest. Many people are saying, don't tell them in Sheboygan. Panel, we'll tell them in Sheboygan, you're great. And we want to thank you folks at home for watching The Hill on NewsNation. Please remember to download the Hill app for the latest news and politics. We'll be back here tomorrow at 6 o'clock Eastern. But lucky for you, Elizabeth Vargas Reports starts right